Patch 7.0 of Dawn Trail is slowly come to a close, and it's leaving me in a very similar state that I've always kind of felt with every expansion. A little disappointed and a little bit frustrated. SE seems to not want to innovate on their formula when it comes to patch content. The X.0 patches always seem to come with the exact same thing outside of a fluctuation in the quality of story and how much story it is there. Sometimes people like the story and some people don't, but that's not really the point of this video. The point of this video is when it comes to the actual content that you do once you've finished the MSQ, it seems to be always the same. And it's been this way since Heavensward. It's a really strange thing to me because you think over the course of now Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, and now Dawn Trail, you would have seen something different. But they haven't done anything different. It's exactly the same every single time. The only difference is the story. And that's frustrating to me. And I think that's a lot beginning to even be more frustrating for other players. And I think it's a bigger point that there is a bit of a mixture on how there is fall off with Endwalker. I think with the fall off of Endwalker, it's kind of given people a situation where they don't have all the reason to log in anymore in the same way. A lot of people, I think, consume the MSQ and then they jet out of here. And that's completely understandable and a way to engage with the game. But there's a lot of other players that want something more to do in the game. And I do realize that at that point, some people might say, well, why aren't you going and doing all the raids? Well, let's say they don't like the raiding. Where's the middle of the road content that people like as opposed to raiding? Guess what? You need to wait until 7.2 or even 7.25. And we also don't even know when space exploration is coming out still. All we have for that is concept art and a few small ideas. And hopefully we'll see something soon. But even in 7.1 coming up, all we see is raid content and 24-man content and story content once again. So you're basically in a situation where you're almost waiting a year to get content that is not raid content or MSQ content. And I do think that's a bit frustrating for a lot of people. I do want to say I recognize that PvP is content for some people as well, but oftentimes I think this is more important for people who are focused on achievements or grinding for leaderboards. It doesn't feel designed for everyone outside of maybe jumping in for a roulette here or there to get some wolf marks, EXP, or poetics. I really hope that SE is keeping in mind that there are other players out there that do have other players' play styles. And I think oftentimes they have basically turned a nose to the style of player that needs a middle ground, that isn't like your dedicated raider. They're not dedicated to like a PvP. They're kind of just like, I want to have PvPe that grinds with like people that are community driven, and I want to just be out there in the world and see other players. I think that's kind of been lost because the game doesn't feel so much like an MMO anymore in a lot of ways, because you're oftentimes just in the city and you pop into an instance and you're not really like flowing through the world. And I know that's not, I understand that's not Final Fantasy XIV's design, right? Like Final Fantasy XIV's design is not to have a complete flow through the world. You are usually jumping into instances due to content and jumping in with randoms. But I think SC really does not take advantage of the field content enough. And I think they have not given enough credit. A lot of the times in these expansions, especially Stormblood and Shadowbringers, that I've seen massive growth in the community, it's been with field content. Eureka and Boja, while it's had very controversial takes in the implementation, especially Pagos, I do think that like there has been longer engagement in people that are constantly playing, and the player base has grown. And I don't think that's just because of the MSQ content leveling up basically between Stormblood to Shadowbringers to Endwalker. And COVID did play a part, to be fair. But I really do think that having content that constantly is engaging people, as opposed to just, oh, I'm going to jump into an instance for my weekly, has died off, and that's why you start to see the fall off that you've ultimately seen over the course of Endwalker and now the start of Dawn Trail. While we are getting field operations in 7.2, and it's probably going to be in 7.25, I would guess, I think that's too long to make people wait. It's a very frustrating thing for me to like have any proof on. There's no proof that this is a solution, but it's a gut feeling. And it's a gut feeling that I've seen speaking with other players and my own personal feelings on the game. I think it's really hard to properly articulate this in any other way than I want to log in on a daily basis and I want to play the game as much as I can, but not be forced to do that. I think it's really important to give long-term goals to players that can constantly work for it. And I don't think it should be power goals necessarily. It should be things that are like, oh, this large piece of content that drives me farther and farther and farther and farther and through it. And I think they did a really good job with that with Eureka and Bozja. It's like you constantly are engaging with it and you eventually arrive at the, you know, it was Baldessian Arsenal in Eureka's case. And then in Bozja's case, you had Castrum Lacus Latori or the Dalridia when it came to Zadnor. I think this kind of content, like, while it's not for everyone, and I do recognize some people don't like this grindy piece of content, it fills the gap for players that need that. And I don't think 14 really, as a game, understands how to keep people like that engaged. I do think there's long-term and achievement goers that can always find something to do, but your average player that wants the kind of little bit of mind-numbing thing to do with like other players, it's not being fulfilled right now. And while these are kind of talking points that have kind of been like over Endwalker, it feels very apparent to me even more than ever that in 7.0 we have to wait almost probably a year to get to 7.2. I think that's insane. Maybe it'll come sooner and maybe they'll speed up the dev process. I don't know. But it feels like you shouldn't have to wait pretty much from the start of the expansion about a year to get something that is long-term engaging for a player that is not looking necessarily just to play raiding. And I don't know what to tell people coming into the game that maybe aren't as interested in raiding, but they want to engage with an MMO. The MMO part of the game does feel like it's like slowly been eaten up in a lot of ways, at least from Endwalker's point and the start of Dawn Trail. And I think it's going to really feel that way going into even 7.1. I do recognize that we are getting a 24-man Savage, but this leads back to what I'm saying is I feel like the content that's always being delivered in the game is raid content, and that's all they really deliver a lot of times. And that was insanely prevalent in Endwalker especially. We did end up getting ultimates back, and I think that was great for the ultimate and like high-end game crowd. And I think they really made it engaging when it came to Abyssos and the difficulty of that tier. While it may have frustrated some because of like the imbalance of P8S, but I do think the difficulty really engaged people. I think people had fun with it. I think Pandemonium in general probably made people have fun with it that were into raiding, on top of being given top and DSR. I really do, at least from the raiding community. I've heard from people that are burnt out from it too. And maybe those people are not being satisfied because they're not being given their content that is like kind of a distraction. I always felt like Eureka and Bozja were a place that people could kind of converge in like skill level types of things that they do for the community and just engage and do stuff together. It's very brain rotty and mind numbing in a lot of ways, but I do think it's like engaging in working together on a common goal. I don't think a lot of newer players maybe see this as much because they see Eureka and Bozja more dead than any other time in the game. And you know what? I've heard that Eureka and Bozja do pop off even now. I've seen Twitch streamers bring in large communities into doing the content, and I think it really revitalizes it. And the people that do see that they kind of get a grasp out of what Eureka and Boja were during that time if they had never experienced it themselves. I think the biggest thing I want to get at is I feel like they need to really go back and look at what makes an MMO and pay attention to that. And I feel like 14 is in a lot of ways lost that compared to where they used to be. I actually, for all of Error's faults when it comes to the MSQ and people not liking the MSQ, I felt like at the time when I played that, it felt more engaging in a community standpoint because everyone was grinding the relic together out in the world when it came to the Atmas or the books or doing some step in the process of making a relic. And I don't think the relic process there was like something like particularly special, but I think it made people engage with each other. And I think a really similar thing happened in Eureka and Boja. So I wish SE didn't just like push this type of content to the side, and they respected it a lot more out of how important it is to having long-term health when it comes to people logging in the game. I know this is going to come up. People are going to say, why don't you just go play another game? And I recognize that that's an option, but I think a lot of people just want to play Final Fantasy XIV and they want to be engaged with the game and they want to be able to be engaged with it in their friends in the way that they've kind of done in the past. And I think it's a lot harder than ever to do that right now. And it's been harder for a lot of Endwalker. There isn't been a lot of community-driven content that you can do besides raiding, and not everyone wants to focus on that. And I get that maybe that's a point where people will be like, well, maybe the game's not for you anymore. I'd make the argument that it's definitely for everyone, considering the fact that the field operations is eventually coming. It's just SE seems to prioritize other things in the game. And I do think the bread and butter of the game is the raiding scene, is the MSQ, but I think the community has gradually been kind of taking hits over the course of Endwalker and Dawntrail, and people are kind of getting fed up with it. I don't think that everyone's going to agree necessarily on this topic because it depends on how much you enjoy maybe the MSQ and how much you feel engaged with the world when it comes to maybe like an RP scene. But I'd say for your average mid-core player that maybe doesn't do a ton of raiding, doesn't have a ton of time on their hands to like sit there and dedicate to a group, and they just want to kind of have something casual to go in and engage with other people and have fun that's not too stressful, but also they can work towards a long-term goal. I think that's missing right now for those people. And I think that's really a large crowd that is your long-term audience. And I hope SE sees that and recognizes that how important that is. Maybe even going into the next expansion. I don't think you're going to see obviously something change over the course of 7.0, 7.1. But I hope SE recognizes when the field operations comes out that if they're able to deliver on it in a way that is engaging and keeps a lot of people going, that they'll give that to us earlier. It may be hard to even have someone convinced of that. And obviously, I don't even know myself if that's going to happen. Maybe we'll all end up hating it. But I hope that it's successful. I hope that it works out. And I hope that it opens up SE's eyes to we need content that keeps people engaged in the game. And it's slowly been dying off over the course of time, or it feels that way. So I don't want to make a doomsayer post. This isn't about like Final Fantasy XIV's dying or anything like that. I just would like, as a long-term player, and to have something that I can work hard towards that they kind of used to deliver. And it doesn't feel that way anymore. Thank you guys for making it this far in the video. If you've gotten to this point, I normally do not make formal videos like this, but I felt this was a topic that I really cared about and I wanted to talk about. It's obviously much more in the realms of rant and probably something I would say on Twitch, but I wanted to really get my mind out there while I had it fresh there and speak it, because a lot of times I unless I am actively going on stream to talk about Final Fantasy XIV, I don't get this kind of thing out of my mind. And I wanted to step aside and just like nail it down. So if you like this type of content, or you want to see more in the future, please hit the subscribe button and a like on the video. Also, if you do want to check out more of me on Twitch, you can always check me out at twitch.tv/KaiyokoStar. But yeah, thank you so much for watching the video, guys. Peace.